Hello, everyone. I'm Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and thank you for joining us on Memorial Day. I just wanted to say, I hope that you are celebrating the holiday in a way that you feel fit for remembering our lost loved ones. And we're excited that you're here to celebrate life and, the genius inside of you. And yeah, today's going to be a day of celebration. So let me bring on my guest. Oh my gosh, you guys are going to love her. Sandra Cavanaugh, welcome to this show. So glad to have you here today.
Hi, Julianne. It's great to be here.
It's one of those, I'm sorry, I have to talk about Memorial Day for one more thing. One day or earlier, I almost said Happy Memorial Day. And I was like, whoo, that's so disrespectful. And because you're really not supposed to say that. But then I thought, what do you say? Like, you want to acknowledge, and there's a celebration of life and like celebrating the life that we have. So, you know what? We're going to celebrate being here. How about that?
I've taken to saying Blessed Memorial Day to
Oh, that's
people.
beautiful. Thank you. Now I know. I was like, I got to say something that's not inappropriate. But anyway, enough about Memorial Day. We're here to talk with you. You are an amazing soul. And I don't normally mention this, but what a mom. Oh my goodness. Wait till you guys hear a little bit. I mean, not that we're necessarily going to talk a lot about that part of your journey, but I'm telling you guys, this is an amazing woman. So I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and, what got you to where you are today.
Oh, wow. Let's see. How
Loaded
fast can I talk? I started out about 36 years ago as an actor in New York and London, and eventually learned that I loved teaching acting and improvisation, and I loved directing, and I love writing, and was doing all of those things, and was teaching at universities and conservatories, and just really having a super blessed life. Then I started to realize, partly inspired by my children, I have 4, one I gave birth to and 3 that I adopted, 2 of those from foster care. And so they came with some special needs. And I started working with special needs kids, and I started recognizing that I was teaching special needs kids the same way I was teaching actors, and the same way I was teaching CEOs, and I was consulting and doing all these lectures, and everything was the same for me. And one day I heard myself apologizing to my acting students. I would say, okay, now we're going to talk about the woo-woo stuff for a second, and I would say everything is energy. And I would say, in acting as in life, this is true. In improv as in life, this is true. And then when I heard myself, I went, hey, wait a minute. Maybe all this spiritual seeking that I've been doing for the last years is actually merged with the way that I teach and the way that I think and the way that I live life. And I realized that Shakespeare's line in As You Like It, that all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players, was no longer just a pretty piece of poetry to me, but a sort of metaphorical, metaphysical guide to life. And I came to believe that everything that works for a successful performance on the great stage of life is the same technique as works for a successful performance on the stage. And so that is how all of my teaching in every realm got to be like that, based on acting technique and improv technique. But also I recognized that the kids I was teaching that had severe special needs, that weren't supposed to be able, they were supposed to be nonverbal, or they were supposed to be unable to do X, Y, or Z, whatever it was. And I would go in and go, yeah, okay, so, and I recognized that literally, when I say everyone is a unique creative genius with a passion and a purpose they came here to share, I mean everyone. And not everyone means everyone, and so I adopted my second favorite metaphor, which is Einstein's quote that everyone is a genius, but if you ask a fish to climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid. So That is the basis of my soapbox, that we have no limit to genius and brilliance in this world. We just have a reluctance to offer it and a resistance to accepting it. And if we don't know that all these people are geniuses, that's on us because we're not listening because they have.
I really like that because it's inclusive. And if we're all energy, then why it makes more sense to me that we would all have our own genius. It
Yeah,
just looks different on different people. That's all.
exactly. It's like, when did we buy into this weird theory that the creator did it extra special good with some people, and some people just blew it, you know? And then it's up to us as human beings to fix them and get them into a special program so that they can do things our way, you know? It's like, what sense does that make when you stop and think about it that way? You know? And when I ask people if they look in the mirror and say, "You're a unique creative genius with a passion and a purpose that came here to share." Everybody laughs like, "Oh, of course not," you know? And I'm like, "Why not?
Yeah.
Why don't we do that?"
Exactly. We're creating ourselves every day. I know a lot of people get stuck in this idea of personality and like, oh, that's
Mhm.
just the way I am. Oh, that's how you've chosen to respond for quite a while. So now that's what, it's just a habit. But that doesn't mean that you are not allowed to change how you show up for yourself and the world. What are your thoughts
Absolutely.
about that? Yeah.
Well, and I extend that metaphor. I do love a metaphor. You may have noticed that already. But I extend that metaphor of all the world's a stage to be that what we recognize as us here
Mhm.
is the character that our soul is playing. So if you think about it in the player character realm, you know, our soul came here to experience what it came here to experience in the body and the personality of this character here that we perceive to be us.
Mhm.
But one of the talks that I give a lot is called Uniting Our Two Selves,
Mhm.
and I talk to people about the fact that we go around in this egoic self, thinking that the soul somehow is just taking a break and resting in the ethers, while we live this life, and then it's gonna check back in when we get to the end and see how we did, you know? It's like, um, well, that's like an airplane thinking that the pilot's just along for the ride, and that the airplane's flying itself. And and we need to sort of reconnect that player and that character and really listen to what our heart is telling us is the soul's desire,
Mhm.
that brought us here. What are we here for? Because nobody's here to sit on the couch and eat Cheetos and watch somebody else on television leading a dynamic life,
Or
That's not.
eating salad.
Right, right. Sorry, wellness coach. I'm a
No,
vegan, so I haven't eaten Cheetos since I was a child, but yeah.
that's funny. Yeah, I don't remember the last time I had a Cheeto, but I just think about the food like substance. I mean, that's that's not even
To be
food.
eating anything sitting on a couch watching somebody else have an experience and just thinking that your life is about, going to your job, coming home, and then
Mhm.
commenting on what other people are doing. None of us are meant to be the backdrop to somebody else's life. We're all meant to play the lead and stand center stage in
Mhm.
the production of our own lives. We came here for our purpose, not
Mhm.
to watch somebody else commit to theirs.
Exactly. So I guess my question for you is, and I'm really curious what your take on this is. Since you are an actor and you have done all sorts of media types of, projects, and then you make a comment about, sitting on TV or sitting on the couch watching TV. What's the difference between enjoying, something that's created like some sort of a show or just sitting there wasting your life away on the couch eating Cheetos. I mean, there's a difference, but I'm curious what you think that is. What, what maybe the line is that people cross.
Well, I think it's the line moves around now that we have so much reality TV and so much media that is called news, and we don't know what we're choosing between in that regard. But in
Yeah.
terms of entertainment, in terms of plays and films, we'll just start there.
Mhm.
That started in the festival of Dionysus in ancient Greece, and it was a religious festival. It was the way that people came to gather around and tell stories about the
Mhm.
relationship between human beings and one another, and between the universe and human beings, and between
Mhm.
society and human beings. And we have been doing that. We've been gathering around the fire, telling stories about the others, forever, trying to understand ourselves. So when we use it that way, when we
Mhm.
use it to develop our empathy, we show children stories, or we read them stories, and it's teaching them concepts of how to live a great life, right? How to show up, how to feel confident,
Mhm.
and so in that regard, when we are feeling, when we are empathizing, when we are seeing the other side of something, and we're developing our compassion muscles,
Mhm.
um, or our intellectual muscle, and we're gaining knowledge, we're gaining understanding. Great. And sometimes it's just entertainment, we need to take a break and have a nice time for a minute, which is all great. It's when that becomes the focus of our attention, and that becomes the replacement for our own response hyphen ability in our own lives. That's
Mhm.
when it becomes toxic, and it becomes self-defeating, and we find a way to hide from taking our own responsibility in our own lives. And the reason I hyphenated, I'll just say really quickly, is because I always tell all my clients and all my students, we have 100% responsibility for our lives, but
Mhm.
that response has a hyphen in the middle of it. It's our ability to respond. We create each moment by how we respond to what is offered into our life. I said I was going to say this briefly, but I'm going to say one more thing really. When I teach improvisation, I always teach my improv students, there are only 3 things you are ever doing in an improvisation. Just 3. And if you can learn to master those 3 and control those 3, you are a master improviser. You are either making an offer, you are accepting an offer from someone or somewhere else, or you are blocking an offer. And in order to be successful in improvisation, you want to offer, accept, and not block. Well, life is a 24/7 improvisation. So in life, as in improvisation, you are only doing one of 3 things 24/7. You are either offering, accepting, or blocking. And if you
Mhm.
let everything be an offer and you accept it, which simply means to acknowledge it as an existent thing, acknowledge it as an offer, then you respond with an accepting and a making an offer of your own into that situation, to add to that situation, to contribute to it and make it better. And blocking is any time that you are saying, no, not my job, not my circus, not my monkeys, whatever, that you're saying no. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't say no to things, but
Mhm.
those are things that are not yours to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that because I was thinking about the book Yes Man. I know that there's a movie out there with Jim Carrey that was loosely based on the book. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it was this guy that used to say no to everything basically. And so for an entire year, no matter what he was asked, he would say yes. And so it got him into some really interesting stuff, but some issues, but and it's a true. I mean, he really did this, but it was interesting, like what because he just realized that he said no to so like everything, all offers, and he found himself sitting at home alone, miserable, just existing, not living, just breathing, basically. So I like this idea of accepting and offering in particular.
Well, yeah, and there are a couple of great master improvisation teachers, and one of them is Keith Johnstone, who I could wax poetical about for decades. But Viola Spolin is a highly recognized improvisation teacher, and she created a game many, many years ago to teach improv students to accept and then offer. And the game is now taught in every corporate workshop from here to anywhere. And it's called Yes And. So
oh my gosh.
You simply learn to say, somebody says, isn't the sky a dark color of green today? You go, yes. And I think you need to see an optometrist really soon, whatever. Or yes, and it's not only my favorite color green, it makes me feel clearly that I'm in love with you. And then you've made another offer, and I'm just talking about a wacky improv, but I have corporate clients call me all the time after I've done trainings with them, consulting, and I will get executives calling me like 2-3 months after a consulting gig, and they'll go, I just need a minute of your time. I have to recount this conversation to you because I have no idea how to yes and this situation.
I love that. It's funny that you mentioned that, because literally ever since you mentioned improv, the first thing that popped into my mind was yes and. I don't even know improv. But I know that. That's so cool. All right, we do need to go to a commercial break, so we're going to be back in just a minute. For those of you who are watching us live, thank you so much for being here. When we come back, we're going to talk about creating your life and saying yes and. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, I'm Julianne Meyer. You're watching Own Your Wellness, and today's special guest is Sandra Cavanaugh. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So during the commercial, sorry, for those that are watching, I have a little cat allergy situation. So if I cough or sneeze, that's what's going on. Anyway, during the commercial break, I was thinking about this whole idea of, how you teach the same across the board. And the thing that I want to touch on has to do with kids. And, you know, I had an interesting upbringing, as I'm sure a lot of people have, but I always felt like I was this miniature adult. And, I had plenty of proof to back it up and all this other stuff. But I would have really appreciated somebody like you teaching me the same way that they teach other people. And I'm just wondering why you do that. Why is it the same?
Why do I do that?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's come from my true belief that it just doesn't make sense for there to be different rules for different humans, you know?
Mhm.
And since I believe that literally all the world is a stage and we are all here playing the role we meant to play, not some accident, not some, random challenge that was deemed out by somebody else, but literally a role we meant to play, then there has to be success within that being, totally
Mhm.
possible within that individual. And why should there be talented people and not talented people, gifted people and not gifted people, blessed people and not blessed people? What? You know? So for me, when I started working with kids, I first started working with kids with behavioral challenges that were like, sort of the put them over here in a classroom over by themselves. And and I found that as long as I gave them the tools
Mhm.
and then let them do what they wanted to do with the tools, they their personalities started to change. Their frustration levels reduced.
Mhm.
And when I started working with really young kids that were, maybe on the autism spectrum, whatever, I would go into the classroom and I would write a play for those kids and give them however large or however small a role they wanted, turn a wacky fairy tale upside down, put them on stage. If they couldn't figure out how to get from point A to point B, I'd give them the hand of somebody who could and have an adult narrator, narrate this wacky fairy tale. And so these
Ooh.
kids got on stage and in front of sometimes 500 people. And I would do the same thing with kids that were suffering from severe illnesses, like kids at the Mountain States Tumor Institute. We had sometimes, the last time we did it, we had 72 children on the stage, ranging in age from 2 to 18. And no matter whether they could rehearse or whatever, they would get there and the production would come off and it would be glorious, and they'd be costumed and made up. Um, but I really, really, really had it come home with my own kids. And then I started volunteering to do these residencies through a statewide organization that provides opportunities for artists to go into schools and work with kids. And so I got a residency and I went marching into the class in a high school locally with the most severely cognitively challenged kids that were from 16 to 18. And I walked into the teacher who happened to be the head of special needs for the whole school district. And I said, "Hey, I got this residency. I want to work with these kids and I'm going to teach them to improvise and I'm going to teach them to ride. And then I'm going to have them enter their plays in the Kennedy Center Discovery Competition." And she's like looking at me like I've got six heads. And she goes, uh, okay, just a reality check. These kids have never written a paragraph in their entire school career. Some of them are nonverbal.
Mhm.
Most of them don't talk to each other. They're not gonna talk to you, and they're not gonna improvise. And I was like, okay, but can I try? And she's like, okay, I can take an hour off every morning. Okay. So I started with them and I taught them to offer and accept and not block. And in 3 years, 2 of those kids won the Kennedy Center competition.
Wow.
And I I firmly believe that there is no one, and I know I've said this already, but there is no one who does not have a purpose they came here for and who
Mhm.
does not have genius inside. We just don't let them share it. You know, I would have these kids writing their stories, and I would have to fire the special needs scribes and go get kids who were a little spectrumy themselves, that would come in and be respectful scribes that would sit there for 10 minutes. If I asked the kids, who's the main character of your story and what color is their hair, the scribes that were special needs trained would sit there for maybe 60 seconds max, and then they'd go, she asked what color his hair is, how about brown? And then of course the kid just goes, yeah, whatever. But if you wait 10 minutes, they'll tell you that the hair is rainbow striped and
Mhm.
that but wait for it. One of the kids that won the Kennedy Center competition, it took him a year to write his screenplay with a scribe, and he made puppets. He didn't like it when I called them dolls, but he had puppets for the characters, and he would talk his way through it all the way through this, and it was a brilliant screenplay on autism. Brilliant. And there was a thing sitting in the middle of this cabin that he had come up with a year before, and literally the night before this was due, I said to him, I betrayed myself. I said to him, does that thing still belong in the middle of the room? What's that there for?" And he was like, I said, should we get rid of it?" Long silence. He goes, "No, wait." I was like, darned if it didn't wrap up the whole thing. Make absolute perfect sense by the end. And he had held on to this concept for a year and
Wow.
worked through it. It was amazing. And when that same teacher that had said, these kids won't do this, one day I had them working on these big poster boards where they were creating their future life 10 years into the future. And so they
Mhm.
were doing these big poster board things. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the class, that same teacher, she goes, "You know what I love about Miss Cavanaugh?" And all the students stop and look at her and they're like, "Yeah, what?" And she goes, "She teaches like she doesn't know there's anything you can't do. And so there isn't."
Oh, wow.
Kids were all sort of like, "Yeah, whatever, thanks, for the interruption." They went back to what they were doing. But that really stuck with me. That is all it
Mhm.
is, and
That's
since that
beautiful.
day, which was that was probably that might have been as much as 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And, I had become a creativity specialist and gotten real kinda, giddy, cocky about the fact that just give 'em to me. I can help them. And, I just it really, really stuck with me that it's just about working with teachers and parents and caregivers and pretty much everyone to recognize that our job, particularly as educators, our job is to provide students with the tools to express their unique creative genius, not to test them and decide if they have any.
Yeah. Oh, that was good. Oh my goodness. Wow. And especially kids, because as children, we're taught to look at our elders and believe what they tell us.
Yeah.
So
Even if they're telling us we can't do something.
yeah.
And the presets, I call them presets in the book, the judgments and the expectations and the preconceived notions and the limiting beliefs that we develop that become our natural default
Mhm.
blocks. We block our own lives. We block offers from other people because we believe that that's dangerous, that's fearful, um, this character that we are playing is is the embodiment of the egoic self.
Mhm.
And I love what Dr. Sue Morter calls the ego. She calls it the protective personality. And I love that because ego has such a bad rap, right? We say, "Oh, they've got a big ego," like that's a bad thing. Our ego doesn't mean to do us harm. Our
Yeah.
ego is our protective part of our
Mhm.
personality. So it's gonna protect us from boo-boos and scary stuff and fear and, it's gonna keep us from that.
Mhm.
Well, it doesn't know that that's the plane telling the pilot to shut up and sit down, you know? It doesn't know that that is not helping us. One of my mentors in theater, Olympia Dukakis, Ollie would always say, "Fear is boring. Knock it off." In her own in her own subtle way.
I love that. I love that. You mentioned your book, so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that because we haven't really touched on it yet. So
Yeah, well, my book, I just happen to have it right here. It's this.
good.
Whoa, whoa, I'm turning it
Oh my
backwards. So my book is called Spontaneous Brilliance: Unleash the Power of Your Unique Creative Genius. And and it is basically that culmination of those two metaphors. And it takes you through what I call my metaphorical, metaphysical guide to life. It takes you
God.
through really looking at the way that we look at how we show up on planet Earth and looks at creativity, what we think of as creativity,
Mhm.
what we think of as genius, how we use our imagination, because our imagination, in my belief, is our connection to our soul.
Mm.
That's how we connect to that soulful realm. If you look at any kind of law of attraction thing, they talk to you about visualization, right?
Yep.
If we can imagine it, right?
I love that. And so people can buy your book through your website and what else? Amazon?
Amazon, Barnes& and Noble,
All
any
the
place,
places.
all the places, all the places. And if you go to my website, there's lots of buttons to push to get it.
Boop, boop, boop. But also, this is how people can reach out to you. And what else can people find here on your website?
Oh, they can find a lot of stuff on my website, but they can find a link right there on the homepage to have a 20-minute complimentary coaching session with me. I love to coach people, and there's no obligation in that whatsoever. You can also email me, you can call me. There are all sorts of ways you can reach out to me, but I just love to meet people. And you can find out how to join the Facebook groups and do complimentary group coaching. There's just all kinds of things there.
I love that. And buy the book.
And buy the book. And buy the book.
I love that. I think that that is so amazing. Um, there's been a few teachers in the world that, like freedom writers, that teacher, I can't remember her name, from the book and the movie. She's kind of had the same idea as you, where, just what do you mean limitations? Let's make this happen. And I just love anybody who can think outside of or live life. Yes. And okay. And
And remembering that people are frustrating, you know? People can be frustrating. Um, we can be frustrating to ourselves when we are blocking ourselves because we think a situation is too hard or not what we want, or why is this happening to me? Nothing is ever happening to us. It's happening for us. So when we look at it that way as an offer, we can step into it rather than, stepping back from it. But when you mentioned my kids, I think my kids are my greatest teachers. And I gave birth to a Buddha. I mean, she's amazing. But my kids, um, a couple of them have significant, both disabilities that they were born with, like fetal alcohol syndrome, but they also, one of them in particular, has some tremendous mental health challenges. And
Mhm.
when she was little, she was diagnosed pretty danged horribly, with some mental health concerns that you only hear in like adults that you're going to want to lock up and throw away the key. And that's what I was told to do. I was
Mhm.
told she needed to be institutionalized for life. There was no way this human being, and she was 10. And I
Wow.
was told there was no way this person was going to be able to be safe for the rest of the world to be with, that she did not have a conscience. She was not going to have one. We're done. Stop. And I just, one, I was told to terminate my parental rights, that this was not what I signed up for.
Mhm.
I found that to be offensive on such a deep level, because that's my daughter. I don't care whether I gave birth to her or not, you know? Um,
Mhm.
that was my daughter. I wasn't gonna give up. I did for a while think, "Okay, in order to keep people safe, we need to have this institutional placement." And she's had several in her lifetime. I adopted her at 9. She is now 29, or just about. And that girl that was not supposed to be able to feel
Mhm.
is one of the most, she's just a big marshmallow. She is a caregiver. She is extremely compassionate. She has some challenges, with, boy, don't give her money to manage money, boy, you know? Don't expect her to always know the difference between the truth and, I call her truth challenged, sometimes it can be a little truth challenged in the storytelling. However, if I were on an island and my leg was broken, I would want her there. If I
Mhm.
am in a difficult situation and I want somebody to really hear me and really help me, hello, if I was in a care center, I would want her to be my caregiver.
I love that. And I'm really glad that you touched on that because, a lot of people watching might be thinking, oh, that's easy for her to say because, when you have a charmed life and blah, blah, people
Mhm.
make assumptions that you're coming from a place of zero challenges, which doesn't exist in the first place. But it seems to be like this weird assumption that people make. So the fact that, you're coming from a place that you put yourself into and was like, okay, this is my kid. It's like, like with anybody else, when you give birth, it's not like you can return to sender,
Hello. Thank you. Yes. That's the point right there, and I coach parents that are thinking of adopting from foster care all the time, and I freak out adoption agencies because I will say to these parents, I'll say, "Okay, everybody write down the reason why you would want to have a baby," and they write it
Mhm.
down, and then I talk to them about some other stuff for a while, and then I circle back around and I go, "Now write down the reason that you want to adopt a child from foster care." And then I go, "Now look at those 2 reasons. If they're not exactly the same, don't adopt from foster care, because
Mhm.
I guarantee you that if you are adopting that child because you wanna do them a favor or do something lovely in the world, that is not the same reason why you wanted to have a baby. You
Yeah.
wanted to have a baby because you wanted to be a parent. You wanted to be a parent. That means you owe that kid everything you can do from them from the second they're born, right? And like
Mhm.
you said, you're not gonna shove them back in the womb, but people think you can shove these kids back on the plane and send them away. And
Yeah.
we do the same thing with our elders,
Mhm.
we out of sight, out of mind, we warehouse the inconvenient people. Well, everybody's inconvenient someday, you
Mhm.
know? And I just, So I guess I have several big passions, but it all comes down to just recognizing that every human being that is here has beautiful things to offer to this world. And, we we need to somehow let go of that judgment scale that
Hmm.
says we're only going to accept offers that look like this or that.
I love that. On that note, we do need to go to one more commercial break. So we're going to be back in just a minute. And for those of you who are watching us on demand, thank you as well for being here. When we come back, we're going to touch on this idea of creativity because it can be an intimidating word, but let's break it down and see how you can be more creative in your life. We'll be right back.
Welcome to E360 TV, the live streaming and on-demand destination for influential voices and enlightened audiences. We offer trending, grassroots, and purpose-driven content across a diverse range of interests. E360 TV is more than just watching programs. We offer the ability to interact with live shows connecting audiences to real, authentic influencers and storytellers while streaming to millions of devices. Real experiences. Raw conversations. One destination for it all. E360 TV.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's bring our guest back. Sandra, welcome back to the show. So during the break, I was thinking about this idea of creativity. And, you touched on that briefly a little bit before about, this idea of being creative. And I think that the way that you describe it is different than what other people might have in their mind. And I'd love for you to break that down.
Okie doke. When I started writing Spontaneous Brilliance, it actually came out of I was sitting, I had been, a coach and a consultant on creativity for several years. And my oldest daughter and I were making a film together, and she was editing it across this office, like way over there. And I was sitting here watching these TED Talks on creativity. This was the way I was, playing with my day. And I was yelling at the screen and about their definitions of the creative process. And I'm yelling at the screen, and all of a sudden she goes, "Mom, would you stop yelling? They can't hear you, and I already know what you think, so would you please write a book?" Get over it. And that really made me start to look at why I was disagreeing with all these people. What was going on that there were all these TED Talks, I mean bazillions of TED Talks
Mhm.
about the creative process. And what I was yelling at the screen at the time is, there is no creative process. There is not a creative process. There is not the creative process. There is your creative process. Everyone has their own creative process because they have their own relationship with their imagination, with their thing that they are doing, that they are bringing onto the planet. And when you say the creative process looks like this, then invariably there is a judgment piece in the creative process that comes way too early. That's blocking the offers, throw it out there, try it, get it down. And so I went looking for the perfect definition of creativity, and I looked everywhere. And I even went to my favorite, like the greatest education speaker ever, Ken Robinson, God bless him. And his definition of creativity was like even limiting. It was like the something of ideas that have value. And I was like, whoa. Whose value?
Yeah.
And so I created in Spontaneous Brilliance my own definition of creativity. And this is it. I'll have to read it to you because I can't ever get it quite right when I say it. So creativity is the conscious and deliberate evolutionary process of developing a thought or thoughts in the imagination and then taking action on those thoughts in order to manifest change, alter perception, enhance understanding, or bring into being something as yet unrealized in our awareness or our physical reality.
I love that.
It's a process. It's your process, whoever you are, about having a thought, right? That's why it's called spontaneous brilliance, because we don't pay attention to those spontaneous thoughts,
No.
So we take that thought and we let it consciously is right? We're making that choice. We're taking responsibility for that thought and letting it get in league with our imagination. And we're working with it. And the purpose of that is to bring something into being that wasn't there before. Anything from a thought, an awareness, a perception, to an actual physical being, right? But we're bringing it into our reality, into our awareness. And we have to first let it get there. We mostly block most of our thoughts, I used to always walk onto stages and go, okay, raise your hand if you've ever had to stop and think. And everybody in the room, hand goes up, CEO to kids with disabilities. Everybody's hand goes up because we all go, wait a second, let me think about that. You right? And then as soon as all the hands were up, I'd go, okay, I'm going to tell you something about that. No, you didn't. No, has to stop and think. As human beings, we think faster than we can even perceive. And there's been everything from the idea of a maximum of 600,000 thoughts a day to a minimum of 20,000 thoughts a day, right? So, and those are actionable thoughts, 20,000 actionable freaking thoughts, okay? So let's take an even smaller number. Let's say in the worst case scenario, you have 6,000 thoughts a day, actionable whole thoughts, not just I need to scratch my nose kind of thoughts, but whole thoughts, right? So 6,000 thoughts, and maybe those are 6,000 new thoughts, because we like to say in the new thought world, yeah, we have 60,000 thoughts a day. Unfortunately, 90% of them are thoughts that we had yesterday as well, right? That we have every day. So let's say there's 6,000 new thoughts a day. Doesn't it stand to reason that of those 6,000 thoughts, one of them might be the brilliant one?
Exactly. How often do we pass over it? We're so busy doing instead of actually being.
Yeah. And people ask me all the time, like, how do you write the books and write the children's books and write the plays and the screenplays, and you act and you're a singer-songwriter and you're writing songs and you're doing blah, blah, blah. And how do you do all that? Well, I carry my phone with me all the time. I push that voice memo and I talk into it, or I sing into it, or I whatever. I capture that spontaneous thought, and then I take a couple hours, 1 day a week, and I go back and sift through and see what's there that I want to then engage in that evolutionary process with.
I love that idea. And I think there's a difference too. I mean, well, it comes back to yes and, because I was thinking about the times when I was in art school and I would be, there was assignments where I had to copy somebody else's work and I would do it. And all those thoughts were, this sucks, blah, blah, yeah, all these negative things. But if I just kept going, then all of a sudden the picture came out and it looked like the thing I was trying to draw. So it's not like, it wasn't the yes and, those were just those negative things that I was just conditioned to think. And it was automatic. It wasn't actually what I mean, how can you expect something that's not formed yet to be formed?
Exactly. It is an evolutionary process. Your
Yeah.
creative process, whatever your creative process is, it is an evolution.
Yeah.
And creativity really, to me, is just that willingness to step into that. It's just the willingness to go try, because there is no failure, only feedback, right? We know that. There's just 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. We get all that. But we just have to look at it like children when they're learning to walk. When they fall on their butt, they don't go, "Oh, I guess I wasn't meant to do that. Let me just stay here for the rest of my life." They
Exactly.
figure out how to get back up and stay up, right? It's a process. It is for all of us. And, I used to have students come to me, especially my adult students. My adult students are those with the most presets, right? And when I started teaching, I was teaching acting and improvisation in New York. And so I was teaching in conservatories. And when I went west and started teaching at universities, then I would get these classrooms full of people who would go, "How do I get an A?" And I'd say, "You have an A. It's just try." It's an acting class, or it's a movement class, or it's an improv class. So just try. And the A is yours to keep, right? And they'd be like, "Yeah, but how do I know that?" And I was like, "Okay, all right. What do I do to get an A?" "You got it." And so I started hearing them say things like, "I don't have a very good imagination, though." "Yes, you do. You're breathing. You've got one, I'm not very creative. I don't think like that. I don't," all these blocks, humongous blocks on their life that was telling them they were not a creative individual. And so God bless the chair of the department where I was first teaching at a university, because I went to him and I was like, "I don't know what to do with this." And I said, "Can I create a class that is just teaching people to imagine and to play? Because these adults need to learn how to play." And he said, "Okay."
I
So
love that.
I created a class for any discipline. People came into it from all over the university, which was mind-blowing. Engineers, nursing students, everybody. But the class was called Imagination and Spontaneity.
I love that.
And
I'm really sorry, but we got to get going because I can't believe it, but we are out of time. I wasn't paying close enough attention. So I apologize to sort of stop us mid-conversation. You're going to have to come back. That's what that means.
That's a deal.
But that is all the time that we have. So everybody go to Sandra's website, not email, website, and buy her book. And thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here. It's been so much fun. The time just flew by.
Thank you, Julianne. It was a blast.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a great week. We'll see you again soon.